My name is Joe. During my day job, I am a video editor for Global News. And then during the evening, when I do my board game work, I both design board games and I also do video work in relation to board games. And so what that means is when it comes to, I'll do how to play videos for games that are produced by Gavin or Roxy Games. So the first time I got into games was when I was, I think, 15. And they started playing Magic in our library. I had no idea about what Magic was, but I would go there with my friends, they would toss me a deck, and then I figured it all out. At first it was card games, then miniature games, and now I got big into board games. And then I've always been a person who wanted to make games, and I never thought I could make a miniatures game, because in that era I only knew of one, which was Games Workshop, and everybody was in the UK. And so the interesting part to me is that there was people in my city making these board games. And so as soon as I found that out, I'm like, oh, maybe this is something I can do. It seems really easy. Wrong, but that's how I got started. And then I started trying to make better games, and then eventually got to the point where I won the CGDA with one of my games. So my favorite games, some of the ones are off the top of my head, tend to be quite simple games. And so Blue Moon City is probably one of the ones. It was like the third or fourth game that I got into after starting to play board games, and it was so easy to grasp, but so fun to play, and so challenging versus your opponents. Like, there was really stressful moments, and I think that always stuck with me. So that's probably one of my favorite games, is Blue Moon City. And then the other one that I really enjoyed recently was Hanabi, and the reason I like that one is simply because it's like the base that it could be and still be like the perfect game, which is what you want to strive for as a designer, right? Is you kind of want to have that game that's 3 rules but perfect, right? Because it would be amazing just to be able to do that. Unfortunately, not everybody can do that, and I know I'm not going to be a person that does that. And so I kind of look to my other favorite games for inspiration on the side of that. So right now, you know, when it comes to miniature games, probably War Machine and Hordes is my favorite in that category, simply because it took kind of the strategy of tabletop gaming away from the luck aspect. So where I kind of differ with some of my friends within my games is that while you try and simplify, and there's some kind of complexity that you just want to keep, even though it shouldn't be there, because that's just how it was always been in those more complex games that I used to play. And so I'm slowly easing out of that, but there's still that, I want to have cool things. I want to have cool miniatures in my games. I want to have interesting dice, and I want to have really good lore. And so it's you have to have a good game, but I still really like the rest of that and want to make sure that I include it in anything I make. So it's not just about designing the game, but also the world that encompasses the game. Where, some designers, it's quite easy for them to say, oh, I just need the numbers, I don't need the wallpaper. Whereas I'm thinking about the wallpaper all the time to make sure that my game stays within the wallpaper I want to give it. Apparently what I really, really enjoy about the process is making spreadsheets, because I've done so many of them by now. But I mean, like, as somebody who does video work and I have kind of a bit of a graphic art background, it's actually quite enjoyable to sit down and work on a game and do that graphics behind it. And so, if I have the time and I'm not working on a video for somebody else, or I'm not really busy at work, I'll actually spruce up my cards a little bit and make them a little bit nicer and do that work. And it's quite relaxing and enjoyable to do that. But then you gotta, in order to make cards, I use InDesign, which uses spreadsheets in order to do. And I find that that's actually quite relaxing as well. You would think it's just data entry and you're just typing in numbers into a spreadsheet. But once you get those numbers in, that's where you kind of get to be creative. You're like, oh, I need a power for this guy. What's it going to be? Oh, I need, what should this stat be? And that's where you start doing the calculations in your head. And you start really thinking about your game. And it's because you have to get something in that data sheet. If there was one thing I didn't like about it, it's hard for me, but it's a necessity for me, which is the play testing. Not the play testing that's hard. It's just I used to have an ego, and I probably still have an ego, and it's something I have to get around. And you know, that's why the game artisans are good, is because they don't let you have an ego. You can't. You just really can't. And so it's I'll get angry for a split second if somebody says something I don't agree with. But that's what's important about game design, is I have to have a reason to not agree with it before I can not agree with it. And so it's a hard part for me to ready myself to know that that's what's going to happen. Some things are going to get torn down. Somebody's going to tell you something you don't like. And so getting ready for it is hard. And it's kind of, you don't want it to come, but you know it has to, because you know somebody has to tell you this doesn't work. And if you can't tell me why you think it works, you should scrap it. And so I enjoy the argument. That's certainly fun, because if you have a reason for something and can articulate it, then they can know your reason for having it. And maybe they can agree, maybe they can disagree, or they'll give their other reasons back. So it's one of those things that I hate anticipating, but love in the moment. This goes with a lot of other work too, when it comes to like art, but basically the main thing is just frequency, right? Your first game is never going to be good. Never. I've never met a person whose first game was good. And we have the best part is we Tom and a few of our other guys brought in our first games just to see how bad we were that while ago. And that's the thing, is if we had stuck with those, we would have been stuck with a bad game forever. Right? That would have been our legacy, that we were never going to make it good. We had no idea how to make it good because we didn't have the volume behind it. We didn't have okay, I know this is bad now. Okay, I know this is wrong to do. You know, you didn't have those stepping stones. And so to get started in anything, do something easy. When you learn from it, throw it out, do another thing a little bit harder, a little bit easier. When you learn from it, maybe go back. But you can't dwell on one thing and expect to get better at anything. And it's the same with video work, with art, with anything that's a creative medium. It's all about the volume. You have to do more to know the difference between what is good and what is bad. Otherwise you'll be stuck on what you think is good and reject everything else. One of the trends I have been noticing that has been, I mean, it's not bad, but it's a little demoralizing sometimes, is how many good game designers there are out there, right? And you know, just the amount of that you've talked to today probably all have really excellent games. And then I know there's people in groups out there, their own groups, that all have excellent games. And there's so many of us now. It's you can kind of feel like a small fish in a big pond. And it's a bit demoralizing, but that's where I think you kind of got to just focus on what you want. And that's where you got to make up your mind, is this is the game I want to play. I want to enjoy my game. I don't need to worry about anybody else. So that if there's any trend I'm worried about, it's just the volume of people that are into it now. Not because I'm jealous of them, but because you have to stand out. And the more people there are, the harder it is to stand out. And you know, and that's kind of what I had a conversation with Adam about this, about the 5-minute dating the game dating that they have at the conventions, where you get 5 minutes to explain your game. And that sounds like a good idea, but it actually annoys me a little bit, because I know people with very heavy games that are very good and, you know, and would be published immediately and are going to get published, but they wouldn't work at that 5-minute talk, because it's just such a heavy game, and it's catered to those gamers. And there's gamers that like that, but there is no way you could get through in 5 minutes what the game is like at all. And so that's kind of, that competition has spurred that need for that quick dating, but I think things are going to fall through the cracks that shouldn't be, and that annoys me a bit. So the things that I've designed, there's one thing that I did weird, but not really weird, and that is that I tried to design 3 separate games, all based in the same universe. And this is kind of where I'm coming back to the idea that lore matters to me. So I wanted to do sci-fi games, but I did three games within this sci-fi universe. And I'm really weird when it comes to sci-fi, because I hate the idea that in the future all we're going to be doing is blowing up each other's spaceships. It was a really grim, bleak idea of the future to me, and I'm like, you know, I figured we would grow past that eventually, and then we would start doing something, more industrious and explorational, and we would be proper pioneers of the space age. And so that's what I wanted these games to be. It wasn't about going and hurting each other. They were about marketing and and competing with each other, but not in a hurtful way, right? It's politically or economically or something like that. And so each of these games kind of took something out of that. And what I ended up with was 3 very separate games all in the same universe. And this is why it's weird. It's hard to sell a game like that, right? If you can't just go on Kickstarter and say, oh, there's 3 games, pick whichever one you like, or get all 3 of these games, right? Normally games are sold, this is what it is, this is how it plays, right? So I think that was the one weird thing that I did, was I tried to make 3 games in the set universe that would all be sold at the same time. And I don't know if that'll happen, but because each of the games was separate, you could separate them. And so the one that won the contest was very much about, the game I won the contest with was called Windfall Gateways. And what that game was about was essentially, the idea was to have a community of planets that you had to build gateways between. So you want to connect these planets, but you want to make sure you're connecting them to something that they enjoy, right? So the planet would have a certain type of habitat, or it would have a certain type of economy. And the idea was, however you place the planets on your gateway map and the gateways themselves, you get more points for a planet the more you satisfy of it. And you started with a draft. So you draft 3 of your cards, and then you would get actions from those drafts. And that's kind of what I was going with. I was trying to do an action draft mechanic. So you're not drafting cards to add to a tableau or to collect a set with. You're drafting your actions for that turn, and then what you take from those actions ends up being what you can do on your turn. It strayed a little bit from that, but it still ended up being about that. It's just you could save your actions, so the action that you drafted you didn't have to use immediately. You could use it later. And essentially the beauty behind that game was that there was a perfect score, right? Because each planet could get up to 10 points, and there's 10 planets. So your max score you could ever possibly get is 90. Nobody's ever gotten it. It's just impossible to reach the max score. So every game that you play against another group of people, you know what the max score is. Everybody knows what they could get up to, but you're still competing just to get the closest because nobody has ever, or probably never will, get a perfect score. And so that was based on this universe and the sci-fi realm, and that was Windfall Expanse. And then the next one, this is what I worked on after, when I got tired of working on the first one I started in this universe, which was Windfall, at the time it was Windfall Galaxy, Windfall Galaxies. And then I changed it to Windfall Expanse, which I might have to change again because that just sounds like expansion, and it's not an expansion, it's a game. So that name is changing all the time. But essentially that was based on one of my other favorite games, which is Race for the Galaxy. And the idea behind, I just love the tableau building and cards comboing off each other. And so the main change between I did that, so mine is still about building a tableau and having cards combo off each other, so that if I do one thing, I'll get an extra card out of that. If I do this, I'll get this out of it. But the main thing that I've changed in that is it's now about exploring as well. And so instead of just building up your tableau, you actually have to explore the universe to build up your tableau. And so the further you out in the galaxy, the better and better buildings you can build, and the more they give for you. And then the last one I did in that series was a star station building game. So the idea is you're building a star station, and this is where it got odd for me, because I needed a mechanic to make sure that the money and the economy worked. And I hate drafting games, but I actually included drafting in it because it was the only way to make this mechanic work. And so it's one of those games where I have something I don't like normally in it, but I feel works in mine, which is, an odd thing to have. But in this case, it's because what I've done is it's an auction for everybody not involved. And so this was kind of my clever way to fix the auction mechanic for me. So if there's 4 players playing the game, the person who starts the auction gets everything that they would normally get. And then the other 3 players get to do an auction to match it. So if I get a card that gives me three green resources and a yellow, I pay the 2 that gives me those 3 green and the yellow, and then the other 3 players can auction to also get that. So one of the other 3 players would say, okay, I'll buy those for 3. The other would be, I buy those for 4. So basically what it's done is it eliminated the player whose turn it is from that auction, so that they don't have to worry that they're missing out, which is what I don't like about a lot of auction games, where if it's my turn and I put something up for auction and I can't buy it, I felt like I've wasted my turn. So in this case, it kind of eliminates that. And then after that, you're just building up a star station, making it look pretty. So those are those 3 games in that world. And then I've done, I mean, everybody does like little side games that they think might work and don't. So I've done a few dungeon crawlers that, you know, they have interesting mechanics, but I got sick of dungeon crawlers. And then there's another one that was, I think it was I was trying to do like a 10 card game, and it's cute, but was never going to go anywhere. So the one I'm currently working on right now, the game I'm currently working on is a game called When the Stars Fall, and this is me bringing back my miniature roots, where essentially I want that's the interesting thing about what's going on now, is miniatures are becoming easier to produce and sculpt, and because of 3D printing. But people prefer board games now. Like the old style miniature games, I think, is kind of dying out. And you can see that every time, you know, most conventions that had both are kind of losing out on the miniature side, and more people are coming to play board games. And what people who design board games have decided to do is just bridge the gap. They're putting miniatures in the board games, and those are usually selling, like I can name 30 Kickstarters I've backed simply because of the miniatures in their board games. And that excites me, because it means that I can make a miniatures game using my board game knowledge and have the best of both worlds. And so the one I'm working on right now is called When the Stars Fall, and it'll be a miniatures game where you're moving your pieces around the board. And the one big difference about it that I'm trying to go with it is there's 2. So the one main goal is I do not want any of the miniatures to actually leave the table. So that's one thing I always had a beef about. Like, I spend a lot of time painting miniatures. And so when I paint these things up and I put it on the table and I'm so excited, and then it gets shot and I put it back in the case and nobody ever gets to see it, right? And so I never liked that about miniatures games. And so my goal for this one is to make sure that when you put a piece on the table, it stays on the table forever until the game is over, so that, you know, you can put your things on display that you've worked so hard on. And then the other thing is it's a pick up and deliver game. So it's directly confrontational, where like we're still casting spells at each other, but there's a side quest where essentially you're also trying to pick up these star shards and deliver them to the stars to charge them. And so there's the idea is that there's 2 ways to win the game. So you can either make the other group rout, or you can gather enough shards that you have enough and can just leave yourself because you don't need any more. And so it's tough. I've been working on it for a while, trying to get it right, and you know, I get a little bit each week, and I think I'm getting closer. But I'm kind of waiting for the spark moment where I can be like, okay, I got this. I can finally have the miniature game that I want, right?